Hi, my name is Walter Mair. I'm the composer for Call of Duty Modern Warfare 3. My recent credits include Apple TV show Liaison and the thriller movie Tim for Netflix. I myself am an avid player of Call of Duty. It's now the 20th anniversary of the game. I'm going to show you how I scored Call of Duty Modern Warfare 3. I'm going to play you the main theme first, including the template and instruments that I've used, which make use of Spitfire libraries. Then we're going to look into Makarov, one of the darkest and sinister characters of the entire franchise. And I'm going to showcase how I recorded the LCO at Air Studios and how I produced those patterns and then enrich those with modular synths, phrases and textures that I've created with my electronic setup. I also want to give you an insight into what it means to score a video game compared to film and TV and how this process was different to my previous projects. The track you just heard is the main theme for Modern Warfare 3. And what is very unusual about that is that this is actually the first track I'd written for the initial pitch. What drew me to the project from the beginning is the brief, which was supposed to be very dark and haunting. And I like that kind of sound world where I can be really creative and have almost like a carte blanche where I can create my own sound world and produce something that's new and fresh. I'm now going to show you some of the libraries that I've used that helped me for the initial pitch to write something that is dark and gnarly and quite sinister. So for the brass line, I used a Neo from Spitfire with a long pulse. I added some distortion and compression, and then I overdubbed that with a very bright and amazing sounding brass sound by Abbey Road 1. You can really hear what the distortion adds to it and kind of brings out the gnarliness of this sound. Next up, I layered the brass with strings, and I felt Oliver Arnold has some beautiful soundscapes that I can use. Also adding some gain, some extra effects on top to give it more presence. I've got these effects right here from Soundtoys, adding a bit more of delay and a bit of more presence on it. It's the underbelly that kind of combines everything and holds everything together. It's quite nice to have those softer sounds together with the harsher sounds. What I absolutely love in all those creative processes is to use the LCO, not only because I record them live, but also because I think as a product, as a library, they totally stand out. They are very unique in sound. I'm going to play you the violins, viola, cello, and double basses together. As you can see, each sound has compression in it, a bit of gain, just to give it more of an oomph. And then on the jelly, I used the infiltrator with some distortion to it and a low-cut filter. On the double basses again, just a bit of compression to give it a bit more of presence in the mix. What was important to me is I knew that I'm going to have some live players on that, even on the initial pitch, maybe one cellist or one viola. So what I liked is to have these sounds not being too precisely played. So they're kind of overlapping, they're a bit blurred, and that creates a really nice mixture when mixed lower in the background. Something I did on top is I used Solstice, which has this amazing bass sound, and the Elder strings, which is I think a octet of string players. And let's have a listen to that again. I added just a bit of compression, and the L does the same, just to give it a bit more of an oomph. I really like how airy it sounds. You can actually hear the room. You can even feel the instruments, the strings vibrating. All of that is so beautifully kind of captured. On top of the melodic parts, we need percussive elements to pick up the pace and kind of connect the notes better. I used that beautiful patch by Hammers. It's the Darbukas with, again, a bit of filtering going on, modulation of the filter, and that sound here has also some automation on it, so it kind of ducks in and out whenever we need that sound. I'm going to play it to you solo first. What's really cool about this library is we've built in not just the loop, which is on that note here, but we've also got reversed phrases, which is on this note here. And together, you can create this kind of pattern of forward and backwards momentum. So I'm going to play that again, just for a quick listen. That is something unexpected, and I really liked it in a track. So you never know quite what happens next. So as you can see, I used Stratus, which is also an amazing library. It has those finer textural, rhythmical elements in there. And I used a very basic preset that's called Synth Matrix and looped rhythms. And on its own, it sounds like. Which is a cool sound. It's got delay on it, and it's got everything that I need as a pulse. But, knowing me, I had to add some extra effects. Effects tracked by Sound Toys, Decapitator, Saturn 2 for extra saturation. And now we're changing a beautiful but quite nice sound into something more gnarly. Have a listen to that. So this totally changed where we're coming from. This sound now is the foundation of a rhythmic pattern that kind of goes a bit in and out of pitch as well. There's some pitch modulation that I drew in. And I think if you listen to all of these sounds together, you get a very good idea of what the initial demo sounds with just the Spitfire libraries. On top of that, I then recorded a solo cellist, added a few modular synths parts, but the basic core sound is like that. And just compared, when we hear everything together, it creates this feeling of impending dread, but it also kind of kicks off the entire franchise. It's the beginning of a big adventure. You can see these orange parts here. This is me working with a cellist, Joni Fuller. I invited her to the studio, and we had a great time recording those ideas, rhythmic ideas, and soundscape ideas on a solo cello, which together with the Spitfire libraries is the end product that I finally kind of delivered as a pitch. So the solo cello in here, the rhythm, the pattern. And it complemented the Spitfire libraries perfectly in that it adds a bit of flexibility in the sound. It's a bit scratchier, and together it adds this kind of big cinematic soundscape that we needed for the franchise. As part of the initial pitch, I had to present my vision for the score. And part of that is that I decided that I would like to record the London Contemporary Orchestra, the LCO, at potentially Air Studios, and record some patterns and textures using those recorded phrases from the LCO as building blocks to create the foundation of the score. And the game director and the entire team really liked that in that recording session, not quite understanding where I'm heading, but still super excited about the potential of those sounds. So let's have a look at the first phrases that I recorded there. This is early on in the process. And I've got a few more, for instance, in the strings, all the rhythmic elements. Let's have a listen to this one here. And I would use those themes again, those elements again in other cues. So there's kind of a combination. Let's listen to another one of those recordings. This time it's more an ebb and flow pad that comes out of nowhere, has those crescendos in there, and it really kind of adds momentum and drama to the cue. So these are the basic recordings we did at Air with the LCO. I like to collect items that are very specific for my sound. One of them is the Resonant Garden by Folktech. You can play the guitar strings that are attached to it. You can record anything into it and then add granular delay and other effects to it. So it's a very creative sound source for anything that is rhythmic and creates patterns. I also really like the Terra by Soma Instruments. It's very easy to play, it's very organic to play. Depending on where and how and what the pressure you apply, it changes the sound. And I use that extensively to play in the main theme. Part of the sounds that form the main theme are pads and synths that I have here. Some of them mimic strings just to add a bit of a different texture to it. Let's have a quick listen here. So this gives it a bit more of a techy electronic vibe, which we definitely need for the franchise, which is very ballsy. There's a lot of tech involved with the guns and everything. Then I mixed everything together. That is the sample libraries from Spitfire. That's the solo cello, the recordings at Air, brass, overdubs from soloists, some electronic sounds, modular synths, drums, anything I programmed and put together, anything that I produced. All of these elements put together results in the main theme for Modern Warfare 3. Let's have a listen. Scoring games compared to film and TV usually means you have to write a lot more music. So very often you write 120, 2 hours, 3 hours sometimes of music, which usually is a mixture of cutscenes where, someone jumps off a cliff and lands on a helicopter and then everything's kind of mapped out frame by frame. But the majority of music is patterns and loop-based, anything from 2 to 3 minutes, from high action, low action. Sometimes you write a track for stealth when you just sneak around of another 2 or 3 minutes. Everything needs to be loopable so that depending on how long the player remains in a certain action, be it, a high octane fight sequence or retreating to, I don't know, reload the gun or plate up. All of that kind of needs to be put into consideration. Now, when I jump into the theme for Makarov, one of the darkest characters of the entire franchise, the theme needed to be like off-kilter, left field, weirder in sound, so we don't want to predict what the next note is going to sound like. So anything that's off is a good thing here. And naturally, I would write using either a keyboard, piano, just kind of adding some chords or a melody. In that particular case, I couldn't do that. We didn't want chords or melody in there. It was all about creating a texture, a soundscape. So I started with percussion. And there's this amazing library by Spitfire, Resonate. I used it, many times before. I had forgotten about the amazing sound and how cool it is. I just opened it for Makarov. So this is actually one of the first sounds that the library opens up with. And it's called Barrel Ensemble Metal Kit. And I just riffed around, played around, and I found this very interesting sound. And as you can see, we only have a few notes in there that make up the theme. It consists mainly of two notes, the low gong and the scrape on top. So we've got two gong, two kind of low booms. And depending on how hard you press, you trigger a different sample, and there's round robins. So again, this is an unpredictability that's built into the entire plugin, which is really cool because you never know quite what to get. And for my kind of finished version, I recorded everything to audio and cut together those round robins I was very keen on. So it's a quite nice process of experimenting. On top of that, I recorded a string drum, which literally is something that a sound designer, Thomas, built for me. And he's great. He builds unique instruments, and I've worked with him extensively over the last few years. And he built this drum, the body, with some very thick, heavy strings on top. And I combine that with the resonate element. So we have resonate playing in the metal kind of field, and we have the oomph and the accent from the string drum. It has a percussive, recognizable element to it, which I felt is going to be the building block and the basis of the Makarov theme. On top of the percussive sounds, I felt I need something that drives it along, something gnarly, something a bit detuned, and I decided to work with the modular synth rig and have different oscillators played at the same time, detune them against each other's. It's like human voices singing, 50, 60 people, and all of them going in and out of tune. I really like that. It kind of plays with the imagination of something going horribly wrong, of something constantly changing. Nothing's predictable, which is perfect for our character Makarov. So the sound on its own, without those kind of shifts. So that's a very harsh and piercing sound that I first mapped out on my modular synth rig. Everything came together really nicely in that cue here. You just heard the first strings coming in. These are live recorded phrases that I really kind of processed quite heavily with distortion and other kind of sound mangling tools. As you can hear, that section already includes the LCO. I added some sound mangling filters like an MS-20 or Wasp filter in my Modular synth. I added distortion plugins and also some other kind of distortion units and modular synths on top, just to make sure that the sound becomes darker and sinister and has this bottom end extension that we want in this cue, like we want to have the speakers rattling when we listen to that cue. Part of the Makarov sounds come from the LCO library from Spitfire. I'm going to show you the jelly and the double basses together because they have this impact on the bottom end of the frequency spectrum. You can see I added some effects to it. All of these instances also go through a short reverb you can see here and a longer reverb, and I have them appointed to different values. And then I split them up in stereo, so it has a very kind of broad attack onto the listener. That sound effect comes from Echo Boy, which really helps the sound to kind of breathe in earlier and have this sort of pre-delay that sucks into the sound. And now that we heard the individual instruments and individual sections that make up the Makarov theme, let's have a listen to the entire theme. When working with live instruments like soloists or the LCO, live orchestra recordings, and blending that together with synths and percussion and percussive instruments, it's important to keep in mind the frequency spectrum that each instrument stays in. So what I often do is I would low cut instruments or high cut, making sure that we only have a frequency spectrum that is actually needed and required in the mix. And I had an amazing score mixer in San Francisco, Walter Mair from Spitfire Productions. He literally mixed all the stems together, made sure that it's all kind of sounding as good as it can be. But it's good to kind of get your premix going as good as possible, because then you know exactly what it's going to sound like, and it makes life easier for the other person to second guess what we're after. On this franchise, in this particular title, we had free reins for me to write as if I had scored a film or TV show. There was a great kind of implementation software. There was a massive sound team behind me, making sure that whatever I deliver to the dub, those stems are going to be implemented in a way that makes for a very interactive player experience. Thank you so much for watching. I hope this gives you some insight and inspiration for your own writing. See you next time.